had to be quarantined. My understanding is that modern medical science has taken care of some of that. One was scarlet fever. Often if somebody had scarlet fever, when you went up to the house, you'd just see a sign posted there. Scarlet fever, quarantine. Diphtheria was one of those quarantines.
It's going to eat it.
Well, George, come on, split the food. It'll be your 10 though, George.
You know it's going to eat it, Junior.
Father of glory, we pray that thou wouldst take the veil away at this present hour. Lord, remind us of the mighty deliverances in the book of Judges. We claim Psalm 44:4, thou art my king, O God, command deliverance for Jacob. Lord, we thank you not only for the promise of deliverance, but the command of deliverance. We thank you for that. Lord, we thank you for this great truth today concerning the barley that help us to realize more and more that the experiences that thou hast given us that were nothing but an old barley cake. Do great and mighty things in and through us. We pray for this class, the young people, that thou wouldst work in their hearts and lives, both the will and the will of thy good pleasure. These brother selves as he teaches us in the Holy Spirit, take the veil away from him. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey. When we closed, we were answering this B question on page 21, what great principle of Christian service is illustrated by the dramatic story. What do you believe to be the central message of it? The victory is won by God through us as our lights shine through broken vessels. And our lights do not shine until the vessels are broken. There's a very familiar prayer which means much to me. I imagine you've heard it. And some of you may say it's meant a lot to you. It's in 4 parts. Take me, break me, make me, and use me. Some, instead of saying use me at the end, say fill me. But it's the same idea. You've heard that or something similar to it. Take me, break me, make me, and use me. Well, break me is a part of it. You know, no chain is stronger than its weakest link. And if that falls, then the whole thing collapses. Naturally, I just like to pray, take me, make me, and use me. Take me, make me, and use me. But it doesn't say that. It says, take me, break me, make me, and use me. The breaking has to take place in order that the light will shine. Now, there's a definite time in the average Christian's life when that comes into focus in a special way. In fact, there may be special periods in a Christian's life when God takes him or her through the breaking process. But it's not only a finished thing for a certain occasion, but it's a progressive thing. It's a progressive thing. For instance, you preachers want to be used of God for your prayer meeting service tomorrow night. There must be some brokenness somewhere along the line if you're going to be using that prayer meeting service. You want to be used next Sunday as you preach the Word of God. You want to be used throughout the week as you call upon people. Take care of various details in your own family and in your church. There must be the breaking that goes on. And that's a great message in this, that victory is won by God through us as our light shines through broken vessels. As I told you earlier, many think, and I believe rightly so, that the Apostle Paul definitely had 2 Corinthians 4, verses 6 to 12 in his mind. We don't know that. But we do know that the message is the same. God has shined in our hearts. give the light. Now notice, the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels. What is this treasure? It's light, see? That's what he's been talking about. We have this treasure of light in earthen vessels, that the exceeding greatness of the power might be of God and not from ourselves. You know, often when you come to certain verses of the Bible, you think of particular individuals who've been used of God to make those verses come alive to you. And I remember Dr. McQuilkin used to quote this over and over. And in his prayers often, and then often in his message, he said, but we have this treasure in earthen vessels. Earthen vessels. But the earthen vessel must be broken in order the light will shine. Now watch what comes after that in 2 Corinthians 4, 6 to 12. We have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the exceeding greatness of the power may be of God, not of ourselves. We're pressed. See, we're pressed. Why? So the vessel will be broken. We're perplexed, that the vessel may be broken. You're willing to be perplexed. You say, oh, that's such a perplexing situation. The idea is, I just wish I weren't perplexed. Better be thankful you are. That's part of the breaking process. It's part of the breaking process. We are pursued. Notice the 3 P's. Pressed, perplexed, pursued. That's the ESV of 1901. I don't know exactly how the King James rendered it. Maybe a little bit different. But the 3 P's there in the ESV. We're pressed, perplexed, pursued, smitten down. Then watch this. Always bearing about in the body the dying of the Lord Jesus, that the life also of Jesus might be made manifest in our mortal flesh. See, the vessel is broken in order that the light may shine. Let me reread this central message and concentrate on another part of it. The victory is won by God through us as our light shines through broken vessels. You remember the words of Judges 7, verse 20? When the vessels were broken, they waved the torches. What did they shout? Notice, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Not just the sword of the Lord, but the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. See, those two things go together. God works through Gideon. God works through this Gideon, and that Gideon, and that Gideon, and that Gideon. It wasn't just, well, the sword of the Lord. He's going to do it. Oh, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Yeah. Amen. Gideon. Are you familiar with the Gideon Society that for years has placed Bibles in hotel rooms? That's where they started. Then they branched out. In fact, I came up against them a little bit in my work in the public schools because they've gone into public schools and given a lot of testaments away. And I came up against them a little bit because I made the children memorize verses in order to get their testaments. Gideons came along and gave them testaments, you know, and their testaments were prettier than the ones I gave them for the Word. But it's been greatly used of God through the years. Now, I don't know. They, for instance, at least some of them are using the NIV. And I do believe that NIV. That thing. See, I'm not just King James only. Some are, but I want to tell you, folks, that NIV, you can need them a good paraphrase. They need them a good paraphrase. And they're using, I know one man who withdrew from the Gideon because of it. I think that in some places they use Good News for Modern Man. Now to me, that's scraping the bottom of the barrel. And they do something like that. It's not what it used to be, but I want to tell you, it's been used of God through the years. And I'm sure, you know, those big organizations differ a lot in terms of local personnel. They differ a lot. You know, class school, I paid my respects to InterVarsity sometimes with those grad students. And some of them came up and said, Miss Huss, what you say about InterVarsity is not true of our campus. It varied a lot. Those big organizations vary a lot in terms of local personnel. A lot of difficult things. But the Gideons have their motto verse from this 7th chapter. It's not the sword of the Lord and Gideon. That'd be a good one. But it's the verse that follows. Does anybody know it? Judges 7:21. Judges 7:21. And they stood, every man in his place, round about the camp. See, that's their motto verse. You can see how it is. Here's one businessman, he stands in his place, he puts Bibles in the hotel rooms in his locality, somebody else in his locality, and so forth. That's their motto verse, Judges 7:21. All right, let me read it again. The victory is won by God through us. It's not just the sword of the Lord, it's the sword of the Lord and Gideon, as our light shines through broken vessels. Notice this question about the closing years of Gideon's life. From your reading of Judges 8, mention and discuss in detail at least 2 or 3 practical lessons which you find in the record concerning the closing years of Gideon's life. Let me mention 2 practical lessons which I find from these closing years. The first is that a man who is mightily used of God can be mightily used by Satan. A man who is mightily used by God can be mightily used by Satan. Now you can see naturally how this works. The very fact that God greatly uses a person makes him potentially an instrument of Satan. Because when God mightily uses a person, that person builds up a following. Then if he goes wrong in his life or in his ministry, he leads many people astray. Amen. And the very fact that God has used him mightily just automatically leads to the fact that Satan can use him mightily. Apart from the Bible itself, to me, one of the clearest illustrations of this, something I think I've mentioned somewhere along the line, in terms of the movement called Pietism in Germany, Pietism. What happened was that after the Protestant Reformation, the situation over there became pretty dead after the main leaders faded out of the picture. There's a lot of dead arguing about little points and bickering. You know, Melanchthon was the Lutheran theologian. He worked with Luther. He was a very timid person. Finally, he said he just wanted to die to get away from the fury of the theologians. And they picked at tiny little points. As, you know, many do today, you have that all through the year. Picking at little points. You know, if your eyes are fixed on the Lord, then you believe with all your heart in the verbal inspiration of Scripture, but you don't pick at little interpretations. And you know, somebody interprets a little bit different from you, and you don't even listen to the rest of the sermon. Makes you mad. Because he doesn't dot his I's and cross his T's with you in every particular. But the fact that the person is mightily used of God makes it possible to be mightily used of Satan. And they had this movement of Pietism in Germany that revolted against that dead stuff. One of the leaders was a man named Spener, S-P-E-N-E-R. I haven't read too much about him. Just what I know, I'm not as impressed with him as I am with another, Franke, F-R-A-N-C-K-E. And he was mightily used of God, a man great in faith. George Mueller got the inspiration for running his orphanages by faith. He got his inspiration from Franke, primarily. And God mightily used it. Pietism was greatly used. But one thing they said was, it's not doctrine, but life. See, they're trying to get away from dead doctrine. Not doctrine, but life. Boy, the Bible doesn't say that. The Bible says not dead doctrine, but living doctrine. Big difference between those two things. And you know, I had a course on the history of modernism at Dallas Seminary, and I came across this amazing thing, that Franke, he was a man strong in faith, was used by Satan to bring on the destructive criticism in Germany. They have this Tübingen school in Germany filled with destructive critics. And many just mentioned the Tübingen school with all this destructive criticism, mythical Jesus and all that kind of thing. And Franke had a part in that. He didn't believe in that. He believed no. But he said not doctrine but life, and he undermined this objective authority. And then we went on and we studied. Hitler came out of that too. You mean Franke brought Hitler? Yeah, Franke brought Hitler. Franke brought Hitler. Boy, frightening. And you realize that a person who is mightily used by God can be mightily used by Satan. I think in the Bible that one of the best illustrations of that, in my own mind at the present, Gideon's the best illustration of it. Maybe if you give me some others later, I decide they're better than them. present. Gideon's the best illustration of this. He was mightily used by God, and yet mightily used by Satan. You see, put it this way. Satan can use a great purifier to corrupt. Gideon was used to purify. You can see naturally how he'd be used when you remember the tribe from which he came, the tribe of Manasseh. And you know, it was a big section. You look at your map. Big section, a half tribe of Manasseh on the west of the Jordan. Another big section, a half tribe of Manasseh on the east of Jordan. And you know that there'll be a lot of extra visiting back and forth between relatives and in-laws and all that sort of thing. And therefore, when Gideon is used to purify this half tribe of Manasseh on the west of the Jordan, automatically his influence is felt over on the east side. He's greatly used to purify Manasseh. Another way he's used to purify, one way he used to purify Manasseh was that he tore down his father's idols. Man, that takes special courage, you know, for a kid to tear down his father's idols. And then he refused the kingship. People want to make him king. Well, Saul didn't refuse the kingship. Then in the 9th chapter, that we'll come to next time, Abimelech didn't refuse the kingship, you can be sure. He was Gideon's bastard son, and he made himself king. You know what Abimelech means? Ab is father, I is my, and Melech's king. My father the king. And whether he just took that name upon himself then, I don't know. But he didn't refuse the kingship. He did anything but refuse the kingship. But Gideon refused the kingship. He was a great purifier. But Satan used a great purifier to corrupt. The first illustration of this I know in the Bible is Noah. Noah used to purify. What was he after? He was used to purify the whole human race. And he went into the ark with the members of his family and came out on a renewed earth. My, how tremendous it was. See, all the venereal disease, and they talk a lot about AIDS today, all that sort of disease, that kind of thing. Boy, those people were wicked to the nth degree. I'm sure they didn't call it AIDS then, but they had that and probably a whole lot worse things. But the blood just purified all that. God used Noah to purify, and yet the first person in the Bible who's mentioned as being drunk was Noah. Say, Noah got drunk? Yeah, he sure did. You ever thought along this line, well, you know, that person is just such a fine Christian, it almost hurts my conscience to pray for him. He or she is so much better Christian than I am, who am I to pray for him or her? I tell you, the better Christian somebody is, the more he needs your prayer. The more she needs your prayer. Because a person can be mightily used by God and also mightily used by Satan. Gideon corrupted Israel by his polygamy and by his concubinage. It's a rather big word, concubinage. It just means he had a concubine. He lived in the marriage relationship with his concubine, wasn't even married to her. So he was a polygamist. The Bible says he had many wives, and then 70 sons. And then he had the concubine and Abimelech, the one son, by the concubine. And Gideon corrupted Israel by his polygamy and his concubinage, and he also corrupted Israel by his refined idolatry. Notice that word, refined idolatry. I compare this with Exodus 32, Aaron's sin of the golden calf, the calf worship. See, that was refined idolatry. That's different from Baal worship. Baal worship is just a complete turning away from everything. But calf worship isn't. Because you see, it resembled the true. It looked like the real thing. Because they had calves that were sacrificed in the God-ordained worship. And so then they made the golden calf. And boy, how ridiculous that was. There, and said we put those materials in there and they came out in the form of the calf. That's about as ridiculous an excuse as anybody can make. And what if they say an excuse is a skin of a reason stuffed with a lie? Boy, that's what that was all right. It's the skin of a reason stuffed with a lie. When he said, but this refined idolatry. You remember the name of this idol in Gideon's case was the ephod, E-P-H-O-D. The ephod was a Bible garment. I think that's the common denominator. Commentators differ a little in exactly what it is. The ephod was connected with the garment of the high priest. in some way. That was a part of the God-ordained worship. But Gideon took the effort in Ophrah. See, that wasn't the God-ordained place. The God-ordained place was where the tabernacle was. But this was man-ordained worship, substituted for God-ordained worship. And boy, when you get that broad way of stating it, you realize how much of that we have today. Now remember, when you come to these, don't just leave these things in the past and say, yeah, there was that enemy. He bowed down before. But ask yourself, what do we have today that's similar to that? Refined idolatry. Well, one of the simplest answers to it, of course, is Roman Catholicism. Roman Catholicism is refined idolatry. You know, 1 Corinthians 10:20 says the things that the heathen sacrifice. Others translate Gentiles, same idea. The heathen sacrifice or the Gentile sacrifice. They sacrifice unto demons, devils, and not unto God. Let me ask you, when a heathen bows down before his idol, whom is he worshiping? God? No, he's worshiping the devil. A minister took me one time through his library. He had a book of Dr. Harry Emerson Boswell, the modernist, on the meaning of prayer. And he said, now, he wrote this before he became a modernist. He certainly did not. Why, it's the modernistic conception of prayer. That when the heathen bows down to sticks and stones, he's worshiping the same God we're worshiping, a little bit less different way. That's not the Bible. He's worshiping the devil. Now watch this. When a Roman Catholic bows down before an image of an angel, whom is he worshiping? The devil.
Amen.
Yeah.
When he bows down before an image of the Virgin Mary,
Yeah.
he's worshiping the devil.
That's right.
When he bows down worshiping before an image of a saint, he's worshiping the devil.
Hey.
Now watch this. When he bows down before an image of Christ, he's worshiping the devil. Amen. Oh, folks, the Pope's going to come around this way. And ask God to guide you now what you say or don't say. Don't let not your good be evil spoken of. And it just, you know, you can use all sorts of facetious language. And in a case like this, I don't think the facetious language be of the Lord. You know, I'd just like to say, that unholy papa's going to come.
Yeah.
You know, something like that. That type of language, I don't believe that would accomplish what you want to accomplish this language. I really would. And hold your tongue as controlled by the Lord. And then let the tongue go where it was. What I'm after is you really believe it with all your heart. That's what I'm after. Not exactly how you'll handle it with every Catholic. Because you wouldn't handle it exactly the same way with every Catholic. God has to lead in individual cases. I mean, do you believe that with all your heart? That when a Catholic bows down before an image of Christ, he is worshiping the devil. He is. It's refined idolatry. That's one of our present day's illustrations. Another present day form of the effort, Gideon's worship, is the preaching of Christ as the problem solver. It's a different Christ altogether. And many fundamentalists are preaching this pseudo-Christ. They think they're preaching the Christ in the Bible. They aren't. A great deal of this talk about the family is just a different message altogether. Preaching Christ as the problem solver. I use this language. The pseudo-Christ named Ann Landers Jesus. That's the pseudo-Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of fundamentalists are preaching that pseudo-Christ today. Ann Landers Jesus. And this used to be one of my favorite choruses, and I still love it. I'm careful. If people ask me to have others sing it, I don't think I would, because of the connotation of this whole thing today. But I think it could be sung the right way. The Savior can solve every problem. The tangles of life can undo. There's nothing too hard for Jesus. There's nothing that he cannot do. I think that could be sung in the right way. I don't think most folks do today. If to get the full message, if you're going to sing it that way, you have to add something. The Savior can solve every problem. The tangles of life can undo. There's nothing too hard for Jesus. There's nothing he can undo. Here's the other. The Savior can't solve any problem. tangles of life he can't undo. There's something too hard for Jesus. There's something that he cannot do. What's too hard for him? Solving problems. Because he's not a problem solver. He's a Savior. He's a Savior. And oh, folks, this is just ripping the Christian church today. The average Bible school student, your Bible college student, is just filled with this. And the average student at any Christian school is filled with this. If you don't believe it, just go to these so-called Christian bookstores. They're flooded with this stuff. That Christ is the problem solver. He is not the problem. Why, one of the greatest blessings in life is unsolved problems. Thank the Lord for your unsolved problems. Why, yeah, then they let you know you just know Mordecai. And, you know, God hadn't called me to be a diagnostician. He's called me to be a Christian. And lots of preachers just take the place of diagnosticians. I could diagnose, I could tell what's wrong with you. Do you realize how many preachers today have gone into this thing of psychoanalysis? Psychoanalysis, analyzing the person, tell them what's wrong with it. Many years ago, before this became so popular at Columbia Bible College, we had a professor. He died some years ago. And a good friend of mine, I liked him. He's awful kind of amazing. But he just hog right over this thing of psychoanalysis. And one of the other faculty members was talking one day and said I was in his office, and I realized as we were sitting there talking, he was psychoanalyzing me the whole way through. That faculty member knew enough about psychoanalysis to know. Another preacher told me this, that I was sitting at the table with the fellow preacher. We were talking, and he said, I realized he just psychoanalyzed me the whole way through. And that stuff was such a bondage to him that he couldn't sit down there and have fellowship with the fellow preacher without psychoanalyzing. Well, this stuff is just filling the Christian church today. You know the names that I mentioned in terms, so you'll know what I mean. You may disagree, but if you disagree, I want you to know you do disagree. I mentioned those names. I have 5 of them. Let me see if I remember them all at once. Dr. Goddard, Dr. Naramore, come on, help me out. Dr. J. Adams, Dr. Tim LaHaye, Dr. Swindoll, I've had people like someone in this class who asked him, I thought he sounded good. He does sound good. He does sound good, but I tell you folks, he's just filled with this stuff. And I'm glad I came back to him because somebody this last Christmas gave me a book of his. And it's very interestingly written, the way he does it. I don't believe in the way he goes at it. He starts with something, you know, that gets you interested. Something, current events and all leading up. Well, that may be God's will sometime, but I'd rather start with the Bible. Start with the Bible and lead from it. If he gets you interested, and I tell you, it's well written, and oh, it's beautifully bound. This person who wrote is one of my in-law relatives, and from up in Indiana, dear Christian. He was saved through the Moody Bible Institute station up at WMBI. Out in Indiana, she heard him regularly in the daytime. You know, for years they were just on in the daytime. I think it's still true. And but she said he's one of my favorites, Dr. Swindoll. Well, it's this whole thing of problem solving. The whole thing is problem solving, and it's a pseudo-Christ. Well, you say, well, listen to his sermon, what he said. Yeah, but the whole thing is geared towards solving the problem. One thing he mentioned in this, the book, is Come Before Winter. Have you ever seen that book? It is interesting. Oh, it's interesting. Got a daily devotional comments. And one of his chapters is entitled Closing the Door to Lust. He has a lot of strong things there, warning ministers against it. But the whole thing falls short. Because I know I've heard him on the radio, he just said that he went to the Ice Follies and thought they were beautiful. Folks, that is not closing the door to lust. That's not closing the door to lust. And you see, well, in his own mind was it filled with lust? God knows that. I don't know. But I know he's encouraging others to go to the Ice Follies when he says they're beautiful. And you know at least some of them aren't going to close the door to lust when they come to something like that. And then he doesn't say anything at all about this whole thing of pastoral counseling. Right? You say, pastoral counseling, we've had it for years, where the pastor is God's messenger, but not a co-position with Christ. That's what a lot of this is now. He's co-positioned with Christ. And they lay great stress on this. Now listen, don't talk too much, listen. The average preacher listens too much. He lets women tell him things that they should never tell him. Oh, believe me. And in this chapter on closing the door to lust, Dr. Swindoll says that he met this, he said, Bible teacher who went around a lot and was keeping a list, a confidential list of the preachers he knew who had fallen into adultery. He listed 42. And then Dr. Swindoll said, now that was several years back. And I'm sure that he had at least a couple of dozen more. Well, folks, that whole thing is loaded that direction. It's loaded that direction. When the woman pours out her heart to the pastor about the things, I want to tell you, any true pastor is going to say, don't tell me that. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. And sometimes the things don't have impurity connected with them, but they still are the wrong kind. You be careful. Don't you let any man tell you confidential things about his wife. Say, well, wife's jealous. And where did he learn jealousy? The man told it. He's lying. Liar? No, I don't mean he's lying that she's jealous. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't. After all, when he says she's wrong, there's a right kind of jealousy. Jealousy that's born of love, and there's a wrong kind that's born of suspicion. But when he says she's jealous, what he means is, goes across people, she's jealous in the wrong way. Where did you find that out from him? Why, he's lying. Because he's not keeping his wedding vow. In his wedding vow, he took her for better or for worse. And he's not taking her for better or for worse when he goes around crying on everybody's shoulder. Oh, I tell you, these things go to hell. They go to hell. And a lot of this stuff today, it's just unscriptural. It's just unscriptural. So many say, oh, I tell you, he's a good listener. You just listen. A good listener is one to interrupt you a lot if you're heading the wrong way. Now, that's all a part of this thing, refined idolatry. That's what a lot of this stuff is today. It's refined idolatry. You've heard me suggest this from time to time in the past, but I'm not exactly announcing it. That doesn't mean all pastoral counsel is wrong. The pastor is the messenger, where he gives stuff in Scripture. What should you do there? What should you not do? If the Scripture's dead, oh, that's different from this stuff today. It's a different message altogether. All right? Two practical lessons that I find in this record. The first is that a man who is mightily used by God can be mightily used by Satan. And then the second practical lesson is summarized in Proverbs 15, verse 1. You know what it is? Proverbs 15:1. I can start it, and then I think you can finish it. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Boy, Gideon's a great illustration of that, positively. You see, the people from the tribe of Ephraim came, said, you didn't call us. You didn't call us. Now, he could have said, you hypocrites. How many of you would have come if I'd called? He didn't say that. No, he just took their word there in terms of it, and he gave a very loving, kind answer. Grievous, soft answer turneth away wrath. Grievous words stir up anger. I believe with all my heart in taking a definite stand on these things. You come in personal dealing, often, there are a million and one things you could say. There may be a million and one things others could say about you. But a soft answer turneth away wrath, a grievous word stir up anger. Many broken pastors have come because the preacher has not obeyed Proverbs 15:1. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Many broken families have come because members of the family have not obeyed God's word in Proverbs 15:1. Soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Many friendships have been broken for the same reason. That's the second practical truth that I find, summarized in Proverbs 15:1. Soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. We're coming down towards the end. I think I have just time enough. Let's omit page 22 and take just one question on page 23. We come to Jephthah. We'll finish Abimelech next time. The fifth declension, Jephthah the judge. Characteristics of true faith which are illustrated by the life and ministry of Jephthah. Underscore the statement, please, because Hebrews 11:32-33 says that Jephthah through faith accomplished great things. It's evident that one key to the study of Jephthah's life is to study it in terms of faith. From your reading of Judges 10-12, mention discussed in detail the characteristics of true faith which you find in the life and ministry of Jephthah. I find three. The first characteristic of true faith is that faith overcomes personal wrong. Of course, when you say faith overcomes it, you mean that God through faith. But I'm just using the word faith here as Hebrews 11 uses. Faith overcomes personal wrong. Jephthah was the son of a harlot. Jephthah was the son of a bad woman. He was wrong before his birth by the sins of others. And he was also wronged after his birth because the brothers in the family cast him out. They wouldn't let him have a part of the family inheritance. They cast him out. Here's somebody, you say, oh, you can't expect much to come from him. You know that idea of many today, oh, the reason why that child acts like he does is his mother didn't treat him right, and father didn't treat him right, and all that sort of thing. No, you don't have that here. Through faith. Through faith. And again, you find some child like that, naturally your heart goes out to that child. But don't just stop there and commiserate with him and say, oh, I realize I don't expect much from you because your folks mistreated you. All that. Pray God will speak to him through his dreams if necessary. Turn him in the right way. And Gideon was wrong before his birth by the sins of others. And then after his birth, he suffered additional injury from his brothers. But faith overcomes personal wrong. I think the story of Jephthah ought to be read along with Deuteronomy 23, verse 2. Deuteronomy 23, verse 2 says that a bastard is an illegitimate child, shall not enter into the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation shall none of his enter into the assembly of the Lord. Now, what's the purpose of that passage? Deuteronomy 23, verse 2. Is the purpose of it to penalize? Penalize somebody because of the sins of his forebears? No, that isn't the purpose. Penalize. The purpose is to purify. And the general rule is that bastards live bastard lives. That's the general rule. There are exceptions. Thank the Lord for the exceptions when God lays hold. But that's the general rule. If somebody is a bastard, he'll live a bastard life. That's the general rule. So you see, the purpose here is not to penalize. The purpose is to purify. Jephthah not only entered into the assembly of the Lord, he was a bastard, but he became a mighty leader in the assembly. Now, listen to the rest of this passage. Deuteronomy 23:3 follows 23:2, of course. It sheds light on 23:2 because it says, an Ammonite and a Moabite shall not enter into the assembly of the Lord because they mistreated the children of Israel and they haven't repented. They haven't turned away from it. Well, you see, why would he mention the bastard in verse 2 and then the Ammonite and the Moabite in verse 3? Because the Ammonite and the Moabite were bastard nations. You go back to the book of Genesis and you'll see that Lot's daughters committed immorality with their father, incest. And then Ben-Ammi was one of the sons, the father of the Ammonites. And then Moab was the other of the sons, father of the Moabites. These were bastard nations. And you see, those two are just put right together. The bastard, verse 2, and then the bastard nation in verse 3. But you see why I mentioned it, shedding light upon the second verse. Do you know of any Moabite who not only came into the assembly of the Lord, but did far more than that? Of course, we're coming to that at the end of the semester. Ruth, Moabite damsel. And you see, she not only came into the assembly of the Lord, she came into the royal line of David. See, that's the way the book of Ruth ends. In the royal line of David and the royal line of Christ. Matthew 1 just includes her right there. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. See, the purpose of this is not to penalize. The purpose is to purify. Many years ago at the Bible college, I was teaching this when I taught Bible survey, and one of the men came to me on this: "The bastard shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord for 10 generations." He said, "Now let me get these details right." He said, "I have a friend that Satan has tormented about this. He's an illegitimate child. And he's come to that verse, he thought he shouldn't even go to church. He should not enter into the assembly of the Lord for 10 generations." He said, "Now let me get this right so I can deal with it." Well, you see, Jephthah was not only a bastard and entering into the assembly of the Lord, but he became a mighty leader in the assembly. And Ruth was a Moabite damsel. And she not only came into the assembly of the Lord, but she came right into the royal line of David and into the royal line of Christ himself. All right, let's have our prayer. It may be that while we pause, it will be led of God just to pray for some particular individual. God will speak to that individual through a dream according to his will. Then would you ask the Lord to let you know more and more that you're just an old martyr. A martyr cake with God behind it. Say this again and ask you to say the verse with me. My power is made perfect in weakness. Say it once more. The Lord Jesus is speaking. He says, my power, let's just say it literally. My dynamite power is made perfect in weakness. Say it with me in that literal way, everybody together. My dynamite power is made